1989, the third year of the Group A era, and the Rally of New Zealand blossoms again. In the 2 years since losing full World Manufacturers' Championship status, the rally had also lost some of its glamour and some of its public appeal. But for 1989, the spectator crowds were back. There was a record entry of 76 cars. Works teams from Europe, America and Japan were competing, and New Zealanders entered in encouraging numbers. Their entries reflected the growing acceptance of Group A and the production Group N by local drivers. The 1989 Rally of New Zealand was, in fact, 3 rallies in one: a round of the World Drivers' Championship, the opening round of the Asia-Pacific Rally Championship, and a round of the New Zealand Series. The event's World Championship status drew entries from many of the rising young stars of European rallying, plus one or more established drivers. They were lured by the chance of picking up a coveted FIA A priority seeding if they could finish in the top 3. The rally organisers gained major publicity for the event by starting it in Auckland City's main business thoroughfare, Queen Street. But it was in the nearby Auckland domain that competition began in earnest. The Asia Pacific Championship brought defending champions Mitsubishi and Kenjiro Shinozuka back for a second attempt at the New Zealand Rally. This time, Shinozuka also had support from Australian Ross Dunkerton in a less highly developed Galant VR4. Up to wrest the title away from Mitsubishi came Mazda and their United States-based works team driver Rod Millen with his 323 four-wheel drive turbo. In fact, Millen's entry would give the event a major boost, for Millen's presence almost certainly spurred the entry of a car built by Mazda's other works team, the Belgium-based Mazda Team Europe, which contests the World Rally Championship. This 323 was in full works specification. It was looked after by a Mazda Team Europe crew, and it had a works driver, Ingvar Carlsson, but it was listed as a private entry. In effect, there was to be a clash between Mazda's 2 works squads, even if one was officially a privateer. Rod Millen was 5th starter. Millen's car ran a 5-speed gearbox and a 240 horsepower motor, compared with the 6-speed X-Track gearbox and 295 horsepower motor in Carlsson's car. The battle of the rival Mazda Works teams looked decided in Carlsson's favour before it had started. Millen went through the day consistently in the top 6, but he'd also lost time with a rare mistake, nosing the car into a bank. Ray Wilson moved from 5th early in the day to 2nd equal with Millen and 1 minute behind Carlsson. By the end of the day, he was 3rd, just 2 seconds behind Millen. Scotsman Jimmy McRae was in a Ford Sierra RS Cosworth. After the disappointment of an engine failure in a V6 Sierra 4x4 in 1988, McRae was looking forward to a better run in 1989. Jimmy produced a stirring drive, which drew enthusiastic cheers from the spectators thronging the route. The wet roads were hardly ideal Sierra country, but with tails sliding wide and the turbocharger pop-off valve tapping out its symphony, McRae got every ounce of performance from the Ford. Like the other two-wheel drive competitors, he knew it was essential to build up as good a time buffer as he could before he reached the soft pumice roads of Rotorua on day 3.
like it there? 19, eh?
Shitty. Really mucky and horrible.
Don't you like our roads?
Not when they're like that, I'm afraid.
Okay.
Not for two-wheel drive, anyway.
Backing up his father in a second Gary Smith-run RS Cosworth was 20-year-old Colin McRae. The horsepower of the rear-wheel drive Sierras became almost an embarrassment on the very wet and treacherous roads of day one. It did, however, make for exciting spectator action. Malcolm Stewart, who won an A seed in the 1988 Rally of New Zealand, drove his faithful Audi Coupe Quattro. Though he had more horsepower this year, Stewart was to be hampered by a small budget and a lack of good tyres. His chances of retaining his seeding were practically nil.
Can you recommend the road?
The road's very good. No problem at all. Magic.
You enjoying yourself this year?
Yeah, yeah. Would like another 100 horsepower, but still. No reliability trickle. Yeah. Hopeful.
Here we go.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
48. Good luck.
Starting sixth was Englishman Malcolm Wilson in the GM Eurosport Works Vauxhall Astra GTe 16 valve. One of Europe's rising stars, Wilson was here with one major goal, an FIA A seeding. An overall win to echo fellow GM Works driver Sepp Heider's effort in 1988 would be welcome, but Wilson was under no illusions about beating Carlson. Wilson's teammate, Swedish driver Mats Jonsson, would start 15th in an Opel Kadett GSI 16 valve. Despite the name differences, the two GM cars were identical. Jonsson would leave the New Zealand Rally with a much enhanced reputation. By the end of the first day, Malcolm Wilson led Jonsson by just 4 seconds. They would seldom get any further apart till the rally's final stage, by which time the two would become affectionately known as the GM twins. Reigning national champion Brian Stokes drove a four-wheel drive Sierra. Stokes had set stage times between 9th and 12th and was pacing himself nicely. He saw day 3 as the key to the rally. Neil Allport was a changed man in the 1989 Rally of New Zealand. His aim was to gain maximum national championship points, and he said he would drive just fast enough to ensure he led the championship contenders. He had expected that would place him around 8th overall, and he ended day 1 with his aim fulfilled. However, this bumper-eye view shows he wasn't out for a Sunday stroll. New Zealand's most experienced international rally driver, Possum Bourne, was in a new Subaru RX Turbo. It ran a motor developed by Possum and his Pukekohe-based team. Bourne was giving the New Zealand Rally probably his most determined shot yet. He and co-driver Roger Freeth had spent many weeks making meticulous pace notes. They had covered some stages as many as 10 times. But this was not to be a successful rally for Bourne. On an early special stage, an engine management computer fault cut the car's motor almost within sight of the finish line. Bourne wound the car along on the starter, and Freeth jumped out to push the Subaru and keep up its momentum. Spectators joined in, and they got the crippled car to the line. But under a rule which says a car cannot be pushed into a control area, Bourne and Freeth were excluded from the rally. They appealed, arguing they were moving the car to a point of safety, as required in rally regulations, but that appeal was disallowed. In the organisers' minds was the fact that right behind Bourne was Toyota Corolla GT driver Ross Meekings, who was excluded from the 1987 rally on broadly similar grounds. The spectacular Meekings was extracting every second out of the Corolla and ran 11th, leading the 1600cc Group A class. Mark Jennings, running 13th overall, led the 36 Group N competitors in his Toyota Celica GT4. Second in class was Wayne Pittams, followed by Frederick Skohug, both driving Lancia Delta Integrales. Skohug had been catching Jennings until he had a brush with the local bird life. A dinner-sized pheasant tried to fly faster than the Swede, with an obvious result at the end of stage 6. Ranked high in the starting lineup were the two Daihatsus of Dave Strong and Marty Rostenberg. They had both gained B seedings as a result of last year's rally, but the lack of four-wheel drive on the gravel saw other Group N cars move away. Rostenberg had only driven his charade a few times before the event. He showed us what it was like in the driver's seat on one of his practice runs. The big mover on day one was Karlsson, winner of the Swedish rally in January. He had conceded victory on the domain stage by a second to Jimmy McRae and Shinozuka. But he then went out and won stage after stage, 6 in all, to arrive at the overnight Parc Fermé with a 71-second lead over Millen.
How's the road in there?
Oh, it's slippery.
It's slippery.
11:59.
The last stage of the day was an all-tarmac race around the streets of Mangere. Despite the drizzle, there were plenty of spectators to enjoy the novelty. Day 2 began in the traditional manner, with a publicity stage on streets around South Auckland's Manukau city centre. At this time, the organisers had included a muddy track through the centre's Hayman Park. And for some drivers, a spin around the park was to take on a new and very literal meaning. Carlson and Millen dead heated to win the stage. Dead heating for second were Allport and Dunkerton. Tarmac specialists Shinozuka and Jimmy McRae were 5th and 6th. McRae was about to mount a charge, but after stage 10, the all-tarmac Twilight Road, he was ahead of Ray Wilson. In the day's first gravel stage in the Maramarua forest, he closed to within 3 seconds of Millen and was 3 seconds ahead of the Mazda by the end of the following test. But Millen got back ahead, and by stage 15 he was 19 seconds in front of the Scotsman. Kiyoshi Inoue in a Group N Galant came to New Zealand fresh from winning Group N in the Acropolis Rally. He started well, but had problems in Maramarua with an apparently simple bend. Inoue's rally was over. More spectacle was provided in Old Hill Road. One corner, but no consensus on how to take it. Shinozuka was driving consistently until a flat tyre on stage 16 lost him more than a minute and dropped him out of the top 10. Allport started higher in the order and maintained the steady pace he had predicted. This year there was no grandstanding. He had one aim: maximum national championship points. Johnson was now up to 4th in the Opal, leading teammate Wilson by 2 seconds, despite a road time penalty of 30 seconds caused by a mechanical problem. Ray Wilson was 6th, but he was to end the day with an uncharacteristic error on the final stage. He clouted a bank and rolled, losing 90 seconds. The rear suspension was damaged, but Wilson limped to the stage finish, peering through a cracked windscreen. Back at Rotorua, his crew carried out a feverish service before the overnight Parc Fermé. They rebuilt the suspension and replaced the windscreen. The normally unflappable routine of the Wilson operation had been rattled. But in worse plight was Jimmy McRae. His roll had been at 100 miles an hour and put him, the Sierra and co-driver Rob Arthur out of the rally. The accident came on stage 18 in the Tokoroa forest. The Sierra ran wide on the high-speed corner, got its wheels into the loose gravel at the side of the road and was spun around. It hit a tree just behind McRae's seat, then rolled over and over down the road. McRae and Arthur were shaken but unhurt. British journalists covering the rally had considered Colin McRae more likely to crash. But except for the odd indiscretion, he produced a performance which made them revise their thinking. National champion Brian Stokes drove consistently and with his usual aggression and individuality in the Big Sierra. He was biding his time for the four-wheel drive roads of day 3. At the head of the field, Carlson had been clearing away. By the end of day 2, he was 3 minutes and 11 seconds ahead of Millen and showing no signs of faltering. Malcolm Wilson was up to 3rd, 20 seconds behind Millen and 7 seconds ahead of teammate Johnson on corrected time. Then came Colin McRae, Ray Wilson, Neil Allport, Shinozuka and Meekins. Up to 11th place was Middle East driver Saeed Al-Hajri in the David Sutton run Sierra Cosworth. Al-Hajri had found day 1 trying. The wet weather and slippery roads had made the rear-wheel drive Ford a nightmare to control. Al-Hajri said it was the first time since 1984 that he had used windscreen wipers in a rally. But on day 2, grip was better, and he began to hit his stride. One of the big improvers on day 2 was Swede Fredrik Skohag. The Italian top-run car had closed within 14 seconds of Group N leader Jennings. Skohag was looking forward to day 3 and the soft-surfaced roads of the Bay of Plenty forests. He felt they would be real Delta country. Jennings edged away on the day's first 2 stages, but Skohag caught him on stage 22 and they led Group N jointly. But that was as far as the Swede got. On the next stage, the first of the 2 infamous Motu Road stages, Skohag crashed. The Lancia ran wide on a corner, teetered in the loose gravel at the end of the road, and then toppled 40 meters down a bank, landing on its wheels in the Motu River. The engine was running. Skohag and co-driver Peter Diekman were unhurt, but the water was too deep. They had to wait to be towed out by a local farmer. The stage was to claim other victims, like Toyota Corolla driver Gary Cliff and Kazuo Soma. Soma, driving a Group N Galant VR4, was seeded a lowly 62nd, but was running 21st overall and 9th in Group N when he crashed. And then there was local hero Paddy Davidson, who was giving Nissan's new People's Rally car, the March Super Turbo, its World Rally Championship debut in Group N. He got a corner wrong and rolled the car right in front of his hometown supporters. Ken Adamson, 3rd in Group N going into Motu 1, was about to gain a place from Skohag's exit. National Championship leader David Ayling showed his sportsmanship by stopping to tow Wayne Pittom's Lancia back onto the road. It was a gesture that left some of his rivals open-mouthed with wonder. Colin McRae drove a significant distance on Special Stage 21 with a flat tyre. He lost about a minute, but it didn't seem to impair his car control. Al-Hajri started to make an impact on the rally by day 3, running in the top 10 for most of the day. He was in a strong 8th place by the end of the leg. During the early part of day 3, Ray Wilson used the scheduled service points to restore his Mazda after the previous night's roll. He maintained 6th position all day. The always spectacular Ross Meekings personified the rallying phrase maximum attack. By now, Carlson led the rally by 3 minutes 34 seconds from Millen. Malcolm Wilson was third, just 1 second in front of Johnson on corrected time. On actual stage time, Johnson was running second to Carlson, having covered the total distance 7 seconds quicker than Millen. It was a superb effort, and it marked out the young Swede as a major future star. He must have rued the 30-second road penalty incurred on day 1. Millen clawed 22 seconds off Carlson during the day 3 night stages, but by the overnight Parc Fermé, the Swede led the rally by 3 minutes and 51 seconds. A rebuild before the overnight Parc Fermé would give him a car that was as good as new for the final day.
I think this was the hardest day. It was long special states and it was quite hard special states also. And then it was lots of fog, I think, those 3 last special states. So we have really to go and look very for drive. So it was very hard.
Did you enjoy the motor in the valley?
Yes, I like the special states and everything worked perfect. Very happy.
The car's going well for you?
Yes, there's no problem with the car.
What are they changing now?
They say change suspension and dry shaft. Like new again.
So what are you going to do tomorrow?
Now, try to come to the finish.
For the second night running, Rod Millen put a new gearbox into the Mazda. He was taking no chances with the car's acknowledged Achilles heel. Malcolm Wilson was third, just 7 seconds down on Millen and 8 seconds ahead of Johnson. These three faced a tough day 4, Millen trying to move away from the GM twins and the GM twins fighting their own battle. The GM Eurosport director was there to keep control.
Tell us about your team.
About the team. I have no fingernails left. Terrible. No, it's very good. We're very pleased so far. And it's very close. 2nd, 3rd, 4th, very close. So tomorrow, another day, the last day. And we'd like to get both our drivers in the top 3 if we can. So that's an A seeding then for next year. So we'll keep our fingers crossed.
Any orders as to who's going to win?
No, we'd like to go and tell Ingvar Carlson that he can't win, but he won't take any notice. In our team, no orders, not yet anyway.
The night's big loser had been Neil Allport. He had limped out of day 3's final stage last, with a stage time of almost 31 minutes. Stage winner, Malcolm Wilson, had taken just 16 minutes and 48 seconds. Allport's problem was that the Mazda had broken its throttle shaft. There was no way of fixing it, so co-driver Bob Haldane got under the bonnet, crouched down on the engine, and operated the throttle manually. Allport had to peer around the open bonnet to try to see where they were going. They went on like that for 14 kilometres. So Allport ended the day 17th, about 13 minutes behind arch-rival Ray Wilson and 1 place behind National Series leader David Ayling. Allport determined to try to close in on Wilson on the final day, but it was not to be. For on day 4, Allport found himself in trouble. The Mazda 323 would not develop full power, and by the Waitomo regroup, he had given up all chance of catching Wilson and securing Mazda's $15,000 bonus for being the first New Zealander. But Wilson had woes too. He was plagued by a misfire that proved difficult to cure, and Carlson had been in difficulties. The 323 was unstable on the early stages, the car weaving all over the road. He suspected a power steering fault, and he lost 30 seconds stopping to see if a wheel had worked loose. But as the day wore on, Carlson resumed business as usual. He was back winning stages. Malcolm Wilson had edged closer to Millen before the Mazda driver fought back and opened a gap that was too big to be closed. And Wilson and Johnson continued their private battle till team manager Melvin Hodgson decided enough was enough. At the end of stage 35, the GM twins were on equal time. Whoever won stage 36 would be allowed to keep the advantage to the finish. Wilson won the stage, and with it third overall in the 1989 Rally of New Zealand. But not to be upstaged, Johnson beat Wilson on all but the final stage of the rally. There he slowed dramatically, finishing the stage 51 seconds down on his teammate. So Wilson had won his A seeding, and Johnson had proved his point to the international rally world. Day 4's big loser was Ross Meekins. After running consistently in the top 10, he was slowed when the Toyota jammed in first gear on an afternoon stage. The service van with the spare gearbox was waiting at the end of the following stage, so Meekins had no option but to drive that stage in first gear too. His only consolation was winning the 1600cc Group A class. 10th overall, and a surprise winner of Group N was Ken Adamson in his Mazda 323 four-wheel drive. Adamson had made a charge on Jennings' class lead at the end of day 3. He kept up the pressure during the final day, but with 1 stage to go, the task looked hopeless. He was too many seconds behind the Toyota, and the Mazda had a cracked disc brake caliper.
A little bit loose up the top there.
But a few hundred metres into the stage, he came across Jennings' Toyota. It was enveloped in smoke. The turbocharger had blown, and with it Jennings' hopes of a class win. The Toyota limped home to finish 4th in Group N. 9th overall, after a rally of constantly changing fortunes, was Ross Dunkerton. Like all gallant VR4 drivers save Shinozuka, who was running experimental wheels, Dunkerton was troubled by stones getting into the brake calipers and tearing off brake lines. But for that, he would have finished much higher. 8th was Al Hajri, who put in an excellent drive once the weather improved. He had to use his windscreen wipers again, but by now he was becoming used to rain. 7th was Ray Wilson, who picked up the Mazda money for being first New Zealander home. On the final day, he had opted not to try to fend off Shinozuka's charge, preferring to concentrate on the first New Zealander gold. 6th went to Shinozuka, who backed his steady performance on the first 3 days with scorching pace on the final day, and in doing so, he picked up the vital Asia-Pacific Series points. Shinozuka had 2 cars for the series, and he planned to compete in all rounds. 5th was Colin McRae with a mature drive in the spectacular Sierra. Such a good performance in conditions that didn't always suit his powerful car underlined McRae's potential stardom. Johnson was 4th, and Malcolm Wilson 3rd, both giving it their all in miserable weather. Millen's drive to second gave him a valuable points edge over Shinazuka in the Asia Pacific Series, and also gained his